Today we begin our dive into deconstruction by talking about the core of the false teachings coming from the ultra-religious, non-affirming, conditional-love church. It's the root of our racism, queerphobia, xenophobia, misogyny, so much of our problems and issues today. What is it? It is the teaching of contempt, us versus them. So what is contempt? Contempt means to view someone, a particular group, or something as beneath you, beneath consideration, worthless or deserving scorn. It means to despise with intense force. Yeah. Sound familiar?
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday? So I call you up and you call me down. Would it be okay?
Well, hello and welcome to the FreedHearts podcast. You okay?
Yeah.
We're starting out laughing before we even start to record. My name is Robert Cottrell, and I'm here as always with
Susan Cottrell.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, everybody. Connect with us at freedhearts.org. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are enjoying it, and share it with your friends and your enemies. That's okay. And support us if you can. That helps a lot. We've talked about the teaching of contempt in a couple of complete episodes. Please go back and search for those if you like. They are some of our most popular episodes of all time.
They're pretty close to the beginning.
One is, and then we replay that and make some comments on that quite a bit later.
Okay.
So you can find it. And if you can't find it, email me, robert@freedhearts.org, and I'll send you the direct links. There you go. How easy is that?
Very easy.
And I may throw in a joke or something. I don't know. I make no promises. But we are about to ask some big questions about some of the core things that we have been asked to believe. Susan gave a great Bible story time kind of outlining those last week. We're going to deconstruct it, and we're going to see what stands and what does not. You know, this is going to be fun. And will likely be a journey on which, what happens? All heaven breaks loose for you. But before we start getting into these individual points, these individual beliefs, we need to kind of set the stage here. And we need to talk about the core message, the core teaching of the Bible as it's been taught to us, the core teaching behind the religious church. Well, much of the conditional love, rules-based, non-affirming, I could go on, religious church.
Yeah.
That is the teaching of contempt. Us versus them.
Yeah.
Now, over time, the details may have changed. The thems have changed. But the teaching, and honestly, the us in that has always been there.
Yeah. We're going to discover this teaching of contempt and what it means and why it's the root of pretty much all our problems today.
So many of our problems today have been are
from
based,
this teaching of contempt. It's at the root of racism, of queerphobia, of xenophobia, of misogyny, so many things. Yeah, we'll unpack that in the upcoming episodes, and it's going to make sense of a whole lot of what's going on.
So let's start with what is it?
Okay, great. The teaching of contempt was a term used to name the widespread anti-Semitism, that the teaching of contempt against Jews that started with early Christians. They called Jews Christ killers, even though the Christians were Jewish. As we'll see with the teaching of contempt, it's a way to smash down one group to raise another group higher, your own group higher. It's made up hatred, and it's like fire. Once it catches hold, it's really hard to stop. For perspective, the teaching of contempt of anti-Semitism is what allowed the Holocaust to happen, and slavery, and human trafficking of all sorts. But we'll get to those.
You know, and it's also a very convenient teaching because it paints the thems as so bad, so reprehensible that we do not have time to examine us.
That's correct.
You know?
That's right. I'm so busy hating you, I don't have to look at my own stuff.
Exactly. That's why there always has to be a them. that's why there always has been a them.
So I have a friend that we knew in the church that to me has been the epitome of judgmental. And she's somebody I kind of love to hate in a way, you know? And I was in my journaling the other day and I thought, why do I think of her still? Why is she a thing for me? And why do I enjoy hating her basically so much? Nobody hates her, disliking, whatever, judging her so much. And as I was writing in my journal, I could feel the Spirit saying, because that was you. You were there when you were in the church.
Wow.
You were judgmental. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I would never have seen myself as that extreme that she is, but it calls in something in me that I wish had never been there.
Yeah. I mean, we
hate people for that reason often.
I mean, we were there. I mean, and we were serious. We were just seriously wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
And one of the most illuminating things that I think I've ever learned is from the renowned Gottman Institute. It's the work, their work basically overhauled couples' relationships. And what they're looking for when they study healthy marriages is they said there's one test for whether a marriage will go the distance or end in divorce. It's not age, it's not money, it's not how long you've known each other, how in love you were when you started. There's just one test. Do you treat each other with contempt? And they can watch a couple for 10 minutes and predict with 90% accuracy if they'll end up divorced.
Wow.
Amazing. And that's what we're looking for here is contempt. That's what they're looking for when they do this is contempt. Dismissive looks or gestures, eye rolling, all reveal contempt. And that thing won't go the distance. Yeah. So what is contempt? Contempt means to view someone or something as beneath you, beneath consideration, worthless, or deserving scorn. It means to despise with intensive force.
Anybody feel on the receiving end of that?
Yeah. Yeah. And the teaching of contempt is where you actively teach contempt about a particular group, that group is less than, worthless, contemptible, that these people are lazy, that those people are bad drivers, that those people are promiscuous, that those people are sinners.
Those people are left-handed. Those people are divorced. Those people are gay.
Yeah. Yeah. Those people are disgusting, whatever group it is. And if any group popped to mind with any of these descriptors, that's from an internalized teaching of contempt that you were taught, that you internalized. It's a way to dehumanize people, a group. And once you dehumanize them, you can pretty much do what you want to them. That's the danger of the teaching of contempt. It precedes slavery. It precedes abuse because they're already subhuman. And so you can do what you want.
Yeah, I mean, that was used in the time of slavery very directly. I mean, 3/4 of a human.
Yes. Yeah, they were, black people were framed as inferior, subhuman, biologically. And so, of course, you can treat them like dogs or worse, actually.
And so today, I mean, it might be that LGBTQ people or those who support them might be labeled falsely as heretics, followers of the devil,
right,
backslidden, all that kind of stuff.
Sinners.
And so it's just easy.
Yeah.
It's easier for them to justify the hateful legislation and stripping of human rights and basic rights and shunning and all the horrible things they do.
Yeah. Once you stop viewing them as a full human, just like you, then it makes it a lot easier to do these things.
Yeah. I think it's really a good kind of flag to look for is, do you see contempt here? Do you see someone elevating themselves or their faith or their beliefs over another person or group in such a way with contempt and using that to justify horrible behavior?
Yeah. Yeah.
Horrible treatment.
I mean, it's a classic move. It's been used toward women over the centuries from back when ancient Greeks considered women to be deformed men. Thank you very much. Through the centuries, through the Middle Ages, the witch trials, through the 70s when the Equal Rights Amendment did not pass, still, all the way to today, women are viewed as deformed men. We'll talk more about that actually in our episode about masculinity and femininity.
Starting next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Teaching of contempt is used against children, that they're just little sin machines we have to control and wrestle into submission.
I remember kind of arguing with someone about that, about just way back as a new believer, talking about how, yes, children are born bad. And the person said, are you serious?
Right.
When's the last time you really encountered, interacted with a child?
Yeah. That's
And-
interesting.
And I didn't hear it, but wow. Again,
Yeah.
like we said last week, it sounds absurd when you just take a step back, a step out of the box.
It is absurd.
And look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Wow. And, I don't like to think of that we bought so much of that. And that's how so many of these really conservative leaders, conservative homeschool groups are able to get so many of their followers into their really rigid curriculum, like Bill Gothard's deadly teachings and others. You have to dehumanize someone in your own psyche before you can treat them as non-human.
You have to dehuman. That's just dehumanize. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Then you don't have to treat them as a human. That's,
Think of that word,
yeah.
dehumanize.
Wow.
You're making somebody not human. So you can treat them as if they're
a
not human. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And many of these churches teach contempt against humanity.
Yeah.
That we're fallen, wicked, disgusting worms who must be redeemed to even have a chance at any kind of goodness. That is absurd too. We'll get into that as we roll out these episodes. But to teach contempt is a very effective way to control a group, to dehumanize them, to be not answerable, to care for them, which is the charge we've been given, is to care for each other, specifically those who have less power and resources than we do. So,
Yeah. I mean, that brings to mind immediately, the issues with poverty and with homelessness.
yeah,
If we can, disgusting, dehumanize someone who's homeless, then we don't have to treat them well.
right.
We don't have to
right.
care for them,
Yeah.
especially when caring for them requires sacrifice on our part.
Yes. Yes.
I forget the exact quote. Maybe I can get it right, but this is not about, whether we have enough food
Yeah.
to feed the hungry.
It's not that we cannot satisfy, that we cannot feed the poor. It's that we cannot satisfy the rich.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Us versus them.
It's not that we don't have enough to feed the poor. But we don't have enough to satisfy the rich.
There you go. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the opposite of contempt?
That's a great question. It's respect, which means to see, spectacles, to see somebody. Contempt means you don't see someone's humanity. Respect means you do. And when you see people who are different from you, when you hear their stories, you develop empathy for them. You relate. Judgment falls away. That's why these churches don't want you hanging out with people who are different, because they don't want you to develop empathy for them. And to see someone for who they really are is the same as love. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. Think about people you don't feel loved by. They're the ones who don't see you. They don't get you. The person who judges you for being queer or being a person of color or whatever it is, or a woman, that person does not see you for who you are. They only see a caricature that they already have in their mind.
Yeah, I mean, contempt comes very easily if you have a lack of knowing someone or knowing their story.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And here's another way to look at this. As an ad hominem attack, which means attack of the person, means at the person. So you're attacking the person and not the issue. And this is what people do when they've run out of intelligent ways to deal with an issue, they attack the person instead.
Or they're unwilling to deal with the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very convenient. I was watching a show where the woman finally, after years of a bad marriage to a man who always kept her down, finally says to him, "I'm filing for divorce." And he touches her cheek and said, "Oh, let's not be impulsive. You know you always do that."
Man.
I wanted to smack him. And that's turning the discussion away from the problem and onto the person. It's gaslighting her. It's blame shifting. It's making her wrong, all the things. And they're all really useful tools of control. And you add the touch to the cheek, which in this case, you could just see it was like ownership. A parallel for teaching of contempt might be when slaves are labeled disordered with drapetomia. Did you remember reading about that? Mm-hmm. That we talked about this in a previous episode. It's that is
mental illness. Yeah.
Yeah, a mental illness that makes slaves want to escape slavery.
Oh man.
Oh, why would you want to escape? My whip here. I don't understand. Rather than seeing them and saying, "Oh, I get it. I wouldn't want to be a slave either. Yeah, let's dismantle this system of slavery." No. Instead, there's something wrong with you to want to escape slavery. Or there's something wrong with you if you can't adjust your sexuality to fit my preference. Or you're just doing this to excuse your sin. Oh, really? You have no idea how much I've worked through this.
But all of those arguments support whatever they have in place.
Yes.
Their system of power and control, their wealth, their standing, their congregation control, all of that.
Their certainty. They don't have to question anything, which they're not really allowed to in their churches, more or less. So you might think loosely of teaching of contempt as being against a group, a certain race or gender, orientation or age or ability or whatever, to dehumanize them as a group so you can rule them and or dismiss them. And you might think of an ad hominem attack as an attack on the individual. So it's like a teaching of contempt on a personal level, individual level. This may not be exactly accurate, but it may be helpful to identify as you're looking at, what is a teaching of contempt? It's a group ad hominem attack.
Okay. Do you have some questions that we can ask ourselves that will be useful?
Yes.
As we go through this, as we try to see this and identify this?
It's really good to ask, who will benefit from this teaching? Who is hurt by this teaching? For example, who benefits from teaching that slaves are subhuman? Slave owners. Who is hurt? Slaves. Who benefits from teaching against LGBTQ people? Teachers, leaders, rulers. Who is hurt? LGBTQ people. And all of us ultimately, because these kind of teachings distort our humanity, but you get what I'm saying.
And also, we may be, whatever the group is we may be part of, may be the next them.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
So again, this ability to do this, to just do this to an entire group of people just because you say so.
Right.
Well, who's next?
Right. Exactly. The group shifts. Yeah, that's right. That's like hot potato.
That's why this is so important.
Yeah.
And that's why this is the core, to understand that this is at the core of this ultra un-Christ-like religious teaching.
Right.
It's important to know this.
Right.
As we move through these individual beliefs and points that have been taught to us as, quote, gospel truth. It's important to ask these questions. Who's benefiting from this?
Right.
Who's being hurt or controlled by this?
Right.
So, okay.
And in the ad hominem example, who benefits from telling you that you're too impulsive or you're too sensitive? The one saying it, the one who wants to make you wrong to keep you under their thumb or to avoid having to think. And who's hurt? You, the one being convinced you're wrong. They don't tell you you're sensitive for your benefit, but for their own.
Well, they say sometimes it's for your benefit.
Yeah, of course they do.
Of course they do. That's right.
Of course, it's so much easier
That's
than
right.
This is for my benefit. Mm-hmm. But the easy answer to that is, well, if I am sensitive, then you should be all the more patient and kind. You know, those fruits of the Spirit. And here's another thing. I just want to make sure we understand this bit too, that in satire or in comedy, it's fair to attack up, not attack down. In other words, you don't make fun of the little boy who trips on the sidewalk. You make fun of, call out, ridicule the man who tripped him. And so there's a power dynamic. So when we're calling out a group of rulers, of those in control with power, that is appropriate to divest them of their abusive power. But it's not attacking down to the least of these. Does that make sense?
And the teaching of contempt does that it actually attacks down and it protects up.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly. And this whole discovery of the teaching of contempt and all the ways it reaches into us and hurts us, it'll take some episodes to really get in and unfold this to see where we're going. When we first started FreedHearts and I was writing the blog, I remember when we were first deconstructing the teaching against LGBTQ people. And I knew that I had some work to express. And it would take several posts, like a number of posts, to put together this body of work. And I kept saying to Rob, I want to put together this body of work because I knew I could do that and it would hold together. But I couldn't say it all in one post. And the same thing is here true. What we have to say about teaching of contempt is going to take some unpacking. So stick with us. And we can't say it all at once. So if you can just hang in there, we'll build something here, an understanding of what we're saying here. And it will increasingly make sense. Yeah?
Yeah.
So meanwhile, start looking for teaching of contempt against various groups. Like you're kind of like an undercover agent. And if that feels a little daunting, or if you want to make it bite-sized, look for ad hominem attacks. When someone loses the plot of the argument and turns it into a personal attack, what do they get out of it? And who is hurt?
Yeah, I think also we talked about the questions we can ask to identify the teaching of contempt about us versus them. Sometimes I feel like, we have the us, which is us, those who are marginalized and oppressed and have been hurt and shunned by the church, and the thems to us is the church leadership that does this. But again, if you look at this up or down, those in power and those being oppressed, that's where this is not part of that us versus them. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's important when we say, do we see an us in this and do we see a them in this? And is the us the ones in power? Are the us the ones in power and doing the controlling and harming? And are the thems the ones being harmed?
Yes.
In this. And as we go through all of this, again, I think it's critically important as we start to look at, and again, some of it will stand, some of it will not, as we start to look at these individual pieces that have been taught to us as pillars of, and they're not, but pillars of the, quote, gospel truth. We have to start looking at, who does this belief benefit?
Right.
And who does it hurt? That will help us open the box and say, okay, I see that it benefits those in power and hurts those not in power. So I'm willing to take a fresh look at this.
Yes,
that's really important.
That's right.
Yeah.
And remember, the whole purpose, the whole aim should be to empower the disempowered and disempower the powerful. That's the whole aim of Christianity, rightly understood, or any faith, rightly understood.
Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Exactly. So that's also a good kind of a gauge.
Okay, well, as we wrap up here today, are there some ideas that you have that people can use while they're waiting for the next episode with bated breath?
Actually,
or chocolate breath or coffee breath, whatever.
To keep in mind, who is it hurting? Who is being helped? Are we empowering the powerful or empowering the disempowered? So just to whet your appetite, here's a little sampler of what we're going to look at as we keep unfolding this. Teachings of contempt against our children, like little children. Teachings of contempt against humanity, against joy. Yes, that's a real thing that's happening. Teachings of contempt against God by turning him into a monster that he's not, that God is not. Against our bodies. Teachings of contempt against our spirits. Just about everything good you can think of, contempt has been taught against it, to rein us in, to keep us in control.
And for me, the most insidious one here is the teaching of contempt against ourselves.
Yes.
Beloved, if we are convinced that we are unlovable,
yes,
how can we receive love?
Yes.
And
from anyone, God or anyone.
From God or from anyone.
From ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, that's what we've got for now. And remember that your assignment, if you choose to accept it, is where do you see teachings of contempt and or ad hominem attacks? So where do you see teachings of contempt against groups or against individuals? Then ask, who benefits and who is hurt? Yeah,
that's a great way to begin this, Susan, and to alter how we look at this. And we do need to shift how we look at this as we start to deconstruct or dive deeper into deconstruction. It's kind of like reading scripture through the lens of love.
Yes, exactly.
If we can look at all this for who benefits and who's hurt by all of this that we are taught and asked to believe.
Yes.
We are on this journey together, beloved. It will open our eyes and it will free our hearts.
Yes.
We love you. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday, so I call you up and you call me down? Would it be okay?
You've been listening to the FreedHearts podcast. We have extensive resources and vibrant, inclusive community for you at freedhearts.org. Please just come say hello. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for the podcast, just email us at podcast@freedhearts.org. Audio engineering is provided by Luke Johnson. The music is provided by Hannah Cottrell, our daughter, the Grammy-nominated Saint Sinner. You can find out more about her and her music at heysaintsinner.com. Please share, subscribe, and follow on your favorite platform, and support us if you can. Thanks for listening.